So can you explain some of the common scenarios where thermal spray might not stick as desired, and maybe what factors lead up to that issue?
Some of the common reasons why it doesn't stick properly is the technique, again, of how you prep that surface. Some people are under the impression that you can take a machine, like a lathe machine, and cut a groove in there like a thread and just spray on that. That helps improve the surface adhesion, but it's not good enough. There's other people who think they can just use a rough piece of sandpaper and score it up like that. Again, that's not good enough for the adhesion. You really do need to have a grit blast surface using, again, a coarse grit, probably minimum of a 60 grit, but we prefer seeing a 36 grit or a 24 grit aluminum oxide or steel shot that gives you a good rough profile. Another common reason why it doesn't stick is sometimes people will send their parts out to be grit blast by another shop, and they bring them back and they see moisture and they get a little rust on them, and they leave them exposed for more than 8 hours, and it creates a problem with the adhesion occurring for the molten material hitting that. There is something about activating the surface. Again, it kind of gets into a whole discussion about van der Waals forces and that it's not appropriate for this call. But when you have a fresh grit blast surface has an activated surface that the material will stick to better. Well, the one last thing that I've seen, and this one, it's just, I think I want to laugh at it. I went to a shop where they were complaining that they weren't getting good adhesion. And I asked them questions over the phone, what their process was. Everything sounded right. So I went to visit them. And sure enough, they were grit blasting it properly. They had the right grit and et cetera, et cetera. But when they went to move the part, they took a nylon strap that was all greasy and they wrapped it around the part and picked it up to take it over to the thermal spray room. Well, again, the grease and the dirt. And that's where their failure was occurring, right where that strap was going around the part. So we had a discussion about that, and they did fix their process so they didn't do that anymore. They strapped it in areas where it wasn't grit blast, or they had other methods of picking up the part where they wouldn't damage it.
So how do those conversations typically go? Are they just like, oh yeah, okay, that's obvious? Like, does that just like a light bulb go off with them? That's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I'll call it the duh factor. And I've experienced it myself.
Yeah.
So like I do stuff and it's like, hey, this isn't working. And someone points out to me, well, you missed this little thing here. Like, you see that on off switch? Turn that on. And I have what I call my duh factor. It's like, oh, okay. Sometimes you're so close to what you're doing, you just can't see the obvious. And if you take a couple steps back or have another person's eye take a look at it, they can see something that you just don't pick up, which is the whole reason that you would consider bringing consultants in. I used to do that years ago when I was the director of coatings at a company, and I used to bring in a consultant once a month, and we had no agenda. What I asked them to do is spend a day walking around our shop and talking to the operators, making notes, and just observing. And he almost always came back with at least one really good nugget of something where we could improve our process. And at first, when he came in, everybody was nervous, like, who is this guy? What's he doing? But as he did it month after month, people just got used to him being around. It was like, oh, here comes, I'll use his name, Fred. Here comes Fred. So sometimes it just takes that external set of eyes to look at something that is obvious to the external eyes, but you're so used to doing it, it just doesn't seem to be a problem in your own house.
Yeah, I would say I think every professional who really focuses or has an expertise on something can relate to that. I mean, I think everybody on a day-to-day basis just can relate to that. Even just around the house is like, you're focused, you're doing a bunch of stuff, and sometimes just the obvious stuff slips through the cracks, and that just happens.
If you look at all the major golf players, they all have a coach.
Mm-hmm.
And the coach doesn't play any better than the professional golfer. The professional golfer is going to, shoot rings around this guy. But he has enough expertise and has been around long enough that he looks at something and in a blink, he can see things that the professional golfer can't see because he's in the middle of his swing. How could he possibly know what these little things are later on. So we all need a coach. If you saw anything today with the automation or the processes that has your interest, give us a call at Thermal Spray Depot at 724-229-5791 or drop us a line at info@thermalspraydepot.com.